Welcome to Jared Scott Outdoors. This YouTube channel is dedicated to getting our youth more involved in the outdoors. To do this, I'll be out with family and friends doing all sorts of outdoor adventures. This week on Jared Scott Outdoors, we are summiting another one of Idaho's 12,000 foot peaks. Now, last year we hiked Leatherman. It took 2 different tries, but we got it done. Cade and Abby were both with me, as well as Riley and Luke, and we hiked Leatherman, which is one of Idaho's tallest peaks. Now, Abby, how was that for you?
A lot of fright, but we got it done.
It was a little rough. She got it done. And Cade, of course, he did just fine as well, but Abby had a little hard time with the exposure portions of that hike. Anyhow, so now we're doing another one of Idaho's 12,000 foot peaks. There are 9 peaks in Idaho, and we are doing Hyndman. I've heard it called Hyndman as well. I think it's called Hyndman, but either way, it is just over 12,000 feet. I think it's 12,009 feet, and it is one of the easiest, or probably is the easiest of the 12ers as far as the grade and exposure and things like that. There's still a ton of elevation we got to cover, and several miles, but from what I've read online and stuff, it's one that is not technical, and so that's why we chose to come out to this one. Anyways, I'm going to show you how we get here, how you get to the trailhead of Hyndman Peak, and then we're going to get started. To get to the Hyndman Peak Trail, you have a bit of a drive to get there. You'll head toward the Sun Valley area. You won't actually make it all the way to Sun Valley, but that's the direction most of us will take. Head through Bellevue, continuing north to Haley on Highway 75. Go ahead and just keep going north. The turn is going to be just outside of Haley a few miles. Keep your eyes open for the East Fork Road and take a right, heading east. Now you'll finally feel like you're getting somewhere as you head up the canyon. This is where we got caught in a traffic jam. Not a traffic jam of cars, but of sheep. Now, I've run into plenty of cattle being driven down Idaho's back roads, but with some patience you can usually drive through them. However, with these sheep, there was no driving through them. All we could do, as well as those stuck with us, was wait, and at the pace we were moving, we were in for a long wait. Finally, when there was a spot that allowed the sheep to be moved just a little to the side of the road, the sheep herders pushed them up the slope a little and allowed us to drive on through. Now we could finally try to make it to the trailhead. Like any trip into the mountains, it's wise to know your route. There's one more turn to the left you have to make. You'll know you're on the right road when you see the giant metal statues. Keep on going, you're almost there. Unlike many other trailheads, this one is accessible by most cars. This creek crossing is the only spot you need just a little bit of clearance for. Aside from it, the road is great all the way to the end. Speaking of which, just keep going and you can't miss the trailhead. It's pretty obvious with plenty of parking and a bathroom. Alright, so as you can see, we have our bikes. So this is a unique 12,000 foot trail in that we get to bike ride a portion of it. From what I understand, it might be about 2.5 miles of it. That is a very easy grade, and so just a good spot to use your bike so you can get up there quick, and more importantly, when you're wasted coming out, you can hit those bikes and just coast on out for a couple miles. And I think we're all going to appreciate when we get that. So it's going to kind of be a mix of things: biking, hiking, summiting a peak. It should be good. We're going to hit the trailhead. As you drop down out of the parking lot on the trail, you immediately hit Hyndman Creek. At first it looks like you may have to go through it, but if you look upstream, there's a side trail that has a solid but narrow bridge. Take that instead of starting out the trip with wet shoes. Now, we didn't make it too far before we were already walking the bikes up a rocky, steepier section. With my 2 youngest kids with very limited trail riding experience, we wouldn't be cruising up this trail. That being said, they still plugged right along. When they had to walk, we walked. When we could ride, we rode. I was actually quite impressed with how well they got used to it and just improved as we went. This is kind of a cool trail in that it starts out in the aspens along the creek. Eventually pine trees get in the mix. Later it's followed by wide open sagebrush filled hillsides, then into some big basins, and finally up the rocky slopes of Hyndman. Get going, go, 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 go! Go! Good job! Overall, this portion of the trail was harder than I thought. For some reason, after reading up on it online, I thought it would be flatter. But in reality, there were several spots with lots of rocks, a steep incline, or both. Needless to say, it made it tough enough that the kids were starting to wonder why we rode the bikes. There was one spot where we could ride a good half mile without stopping, but overall there was lots of stopping and walking as we went. Again, an experienced rider could probably ride most of the trail without walking, but not us, especially with these two.
At some spots it's really rocky, others it's really smooth. I like the smooth parts.
Eventually we came to a fork in the trail. Alright, so those two are heading on up the left trail. We are, let me see here, 2.3 miles in, according to my GPS, and there's a trail split. And I noticed on Google Earth when I checked this out that there was this, and it looks like we take the left, which is going to hang another sharp left and head up this canyon up there. I also don't think we've got more than a half mile left of bike riding. We'll see, we're getting pretty close. As I thought, we were able to bike about a third of a mile further before finally deciding the trail might be getting too difficult to ride.
So it took us about an hour to get up here, and we're going to ditch our bikes and we're going to get our walking sticks and head up.
2.5 miles in. Not much further than where the trail splits. That's the magic spot to ditch the bikes. Start hiking. The Hyndman Creek comes in and out of sight multiple times along the trail, but it's after the trail starts to steepen and you're looking for a good place for a rest when you round the bend to see a beautiful section of water. This is actually going to be even more enticing for a break when you're coming off the mountain. After descending several thousand feet and having blistering hot feet, this is a great place to wade in and cool off. Well, back to the trail. It's a sagebrush hillside that seems to go straight up. Until you reach the actual rock scramble at the end, this is the steepest part of the hike. Just push through this brutal section knowing that up ahead it flattens out for a time and is actually quite scenic. A far cry from this tough patch. We'd been leapfrogging with this family up ahead. They had a couple little girls that were doing amazing on the hike. We could hardly keep up with them at times. As I mentioned, this section of the trail was quite scenic, with a handful of little ponds as well as water crossings with pretty limited elevation gain, so overall a very enjoyable part. Now don't get me wrong, there were still plenty of tough spots to hike, like this spot that followed closely by the river as it cascaded down some slick rocks. But when you know you have several thousand feet to ascend and the peak is right in front of you, you know there has to be some much tougher parts ahead.
Well, that up there is definitely the peak. My dad checked his topo maps and it was it. I don't know if I'm happy about it or not yet. We'll see when we get up there.
Cade, why do you look like you're dying?
Because I am.
Alright, so Cade said it was time for a major break. He needed some snack, a little bit of energy boost here. The looks he's giving us, looks like he's dying. But I'm pretty sure he'll make it. We'll keep going, we'll see. But we're right at the we're up in the basin and just a little bit before where we get the steep, just up. When I just checked on my Topo Maps app, I've got about 1.15 miles straight to it as the crow flies. So we're probably looking at 1.5, 1 3/4 mile left. So we're actually moving along quite nicely. We do have quite a bit of elevation, however, still to gain. We're about 9,600 feet, so we've still got well, about 2,500 feet roughly to get. So. It was interesting in that there would be a large flat section with a pond or two, followed by an uphill climb with another flat section on top. This pattern repeated itself several times. It actually worked out pretty well to gain some elevation and then get an easy stretch to rest your legs, and then gain elevation again, followed by an easy spot again. How are you doing, Cade?
I feel like we should already be at the top.
Well, it's just right there. Only less than a mile away. However, it's a lot harder than a mile away.
It looks like we're going to go up this saddle and just follow the ridge up, but it doesn't have very much exposure, so it looks doable.
When we made it to this bigger lake called Sundance Lake, it was pretty enough that it deserved at least a minute-long break just to take in the beauty. But as you know, this wasn't the end goal. So with our legs back under us, it was time to hit the trail once more. There were still more of the same flat section followed by steep climbs, even though we were now completely beyond the tree lines. The grandeur of Hyndman Peak right in front of us was unmistakable now, and yes, a little intimidating, but the kids just kept plugging along. This trail really does have it all. It first went through the aspen trees along the stream at the beginning, climbed higher into the pines and along some beautiful ponds, and now we find ourselves in some amazing flower-filled basins. Thousands of yellow, purple, red, and white flowers. All right, to go along with all these amazing flowers up here is water still. So we are just about ready to hit pure rock, you know, and literally right underneath it. And there's still water, so keep that in mind for packing. We brought enough water that we wouldn't need to get more, not knowing for sure. But you could definitely take about half of the water you needed and then at any point refill, especially before you start the rough stuff. But we are now at the rougher stuff. We've got this family that's been in front of us that look like they're kind of scrambling off here in that orangish red patch instead of going clear to the saddle. So maybe the trail doesn't quite go where I thought. They're scrambling a bit, so I'm not sure if they're on it or not, but I'm kind of curious now. I'm not quite sure where this trail goes. It might be a rock scramble, just going anywhere. I don't know. We'll find out. Sure enough, the trail angled toward the other family. Now at this point, we were on pure rocks, and so there really wasn't a trail, but rather trail markers. When there's this many rocks, you have to keep a sharp eye out for the rock cairns that guide the way. If you do lose the path, no big deal. It just goes right up into that orange colored rock and dirt patch. So just work that way and you'll find the trail. Well, the rock cairns are leading us right to where that other family went, so apparently right up this reddish brown chunk of rock, which actually looks like a lot of dirt mixed in there, a little slick. But apparently this is the trail. This is where the real hike begins. It's just up and up and up. Rocks, rocks, and more rocks. And the trail, well, you'll see it here and there, but overall, it's just a rock scramble. The family ahead of us was still pushing along, which was very impressive considering the age of the little girls. And suddenly, Cade got a burst of energy. He got it in his head that he wanted to get to the top in 45 minutes and just started covering ground like a mountain goat. I read that this was class 2 and better, easier that is, and it is. Definitely no exposure issues here. Just a good rock scramble. Kids are plugging along, Cade especially. Looks like somebody lit a fire under him because he's just flying. So they're doing awesome. But yeah, this is a perfect peak if you're worried about exposure, but you still want to climb a big one, because there is plenty of elevation gain here. We're feeling it right now. But as you can see, beautiful, but very doable for those that don't like that exposure. So we're close, long ways away still, but close for elevation. But we're gonna get there pretty quick. We did eventually catch the other family, who had to sit down to take a break, but Abby and I had to keep moving so that Cade wouldn't get out of sight. He was already far enough above us that I could barely keep track of him.
Well, Cade over there is just buzzing up. He's probably 5 minutes ahead of us, and it's not nearly as bad as Leatherman, and since I have fear of heights, I can say it, and it's not very scary. It's not very slick as Leatherman, and it's really fun just to be able to be out here and get some hiking in.
There was definitely good solid rock patches to scramble up, but there were tough sections as well. I don't know how you can find a dirt path on the face of a mountain of rocks, but oddly enough, there are segments of a dirt trail. However, trying to hike up this dirt was very tough. It was so slick that it seemed 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And trying to walk off the trail on the rocks seemed to be just about as tough in parts as the rocks seemed to slide out from under our feet. It's different than Leatherman. It's bigger rocks, jagged rocks, but still like to slide out from under you, which makes you nervous about hikers below you, things like that. There's kind of a dirt path here and there, but that dirt is just super slick too, and so that's kind of been the story of this upper third, maybe upper half of the main peak, is just this slick stuff that's really getting us. I'm finally nearly to the top. I've probably got 100 yards, and the rock is solidified quite a bit, so now it's pretty good. Cade just hollered, so I know he made it to the top. So if my wife sees this, I couldn't stop him. He just went. Luckily, this is a mountain that doesn't have exposure on it, so I've got Abby just below me a little bit, taking a little bit of break, but we're almost there. One's there, the rest of us are just about there, but the view already is spectacular, so I can't wait to get up on top. Sure enough, looking up, there was Cade waving at the top. That meant we were close, and as an improvement, the rock solidified nicely, making the last part of the rock scramble much easier.
Yeah, I'm coming to give you a hug, please. Look at the flag.
Good job!
Woo!
Those guys turned around.
Holy cow! And I was like, stop it, and then like turn. Woo woo! We did it! Good job.
Now everyone likes finality to a goal, and writing your name on the registry at the top of the peak seems to be the act that seals the deal for my kids. And honestly, I don't blame them. They accomplished something pretty awesome. The view from the tops of Idaho's peaks is always amazing, and this peak was no exception. The fact that the air in the lowland was so clear, with the sky above being just as clear, made it so the entire panoramic view was incredible. All right, so here we are at the top of Hyndman Peak. Abby and Cade, what do you think?
It was a ball. I loved it.
It was a ball?
It was a ball.
So there was an exposure. That was the good thing about this peak. It's still, you're climbing just as much as any other 12er. There's a lot of miles you put in. It beats your knees up pretty good, just like any other one, but you don't have that exposure. So for any of you guys that are afraid of heights, this is the perfect one for you to come on, but it's going to be tough. So these guys did awesome. Cade just flew up the mountain. I don't know what got into him. We couldn't stop him. But Abby still, I mean, she put on a really good pace as well. She just wasn't trying to race this kid here. So they did awesome. They did awesome. And the view up here is just spectacular. It's actually one of the best days I think I've ever summited a peak as far as weather. There is not a cloud in the sky, and it's very clear, so we can just see forever out here. So it is truly an amazing day to be out here, the end of August, sitting up on the top of the world up here in Idaho. So this was a great time. If you guys have any interest in summiting some of Idaho's 12ers, you know, this is probably one of those, if you haven't done it, probably the first one to put on the list. And then because they just get a little more difficult as you go. These episodes can't be done without your help. You know the drill. Please make some comments, like and subscribe, and I'll keep working on more videos.